Laura lived in Portland, Oregon, in a quiet suburban neighborhood where the houses looked almost the same, each with neatly trimmed lawns and front porches decorated with flowers. To everyone outside, her life looked steady and calm. She had a good job at a local office, a teenage son she adored, and a home that always felt safe. But what no one could see was the emptiness she carried inside, an emptiness she had learned to hide. She smiled often, talked politely with neighbors, and kept herself busy with work. But when the evenings grew quiet, the silence weighed heavily on her heart. Her son, Ethan, was 17 and the center of her world. He had grown tall, with bright eyes that reminded her of her younger self, hopeful, curious, and always searching for something. Lavra often thought of him as her anchor, the reason she had kept moving forward, even when life had thrown her into storms she never expected. After her marriage ended years ago, she poured all her love into raising him. She never dated, never allowed herself to think too much about what she missed, because she told herself Ethan was enough. And in many ways, he was. He filled the house with laughter, silly jokes, and sometimes teenage mood swings, but through it all, he reminded her that she wasn't truly alone. Still, there were moments, small, unspoken moments, when she felt the ache of what she had lost. On Saturday mornings, when she saw couples holding hands at the farmer's market. On Sunday evenings, when she cooked dinner and sat across from Ethan, noticing the empty chair that once belonged to his father. At night, when the house was still, she sometimes reached for a book or a glass of wine. Not because she wanted them, but because she needed something to distract her from the loneliness pressing in. Ethan noticed more than she thought. He would sometimes tease her lightly, asking why she never went out or why she turned down invitations from friends. "Mom, you're too serious," he would say, laughing, trying to make her smile. And she always brushed it off. "I'm fine, Ethan. Don't worry about me," she would reply, though deep down she knew she was not entirely fine. She had simply taught herself to survive without longing for more. That evening in late autumn, Laura sat by the living room window as the sun slipped lower behind the trees. The sky glowed orange, fading into pink, and the air carried the crisp bite of approaching winter. She pulled her sweater closer and watched Ethan tossing a basketball in the driveway. He was growing up so fast. Soon, he would leave for college, and she would face a house even quieter than now. The thought filled her with both pride and fear. Dinner was simple that night: roasted chicken, salad, and a loaf of bread from the bakery. Laura lit a small candle in the center of the table, not for any reason, except that she liked the warmth of its glow. Ethan came inside, hair damp from the drizzle, cheeks flushed from the cold. He sat across from her, full of energy, chatting about school, his friends, and a project he had been working on. Lavra listened, smiling, her heart swelling with love for him. Yet behind the joy, there was a flicker of unease she couldn't explain. It was as if the quiet rhythm of her life was about to shift. She didn't know why she felt it, but she did. She sensed something unspoken in Ethan's eyes, something he wanted to tell her, but hadn't yet found the words for. As they ate, the candlelight danced between them, softening the edges of the room. Lavra looked at her son and felt that familiar mix of gratitude and sorrow. She had built her life around him, but she couldn't ignore the shadow of longing that sometimes rose within her. Longing for laughter that wasn't just between a mother and her son. Longing for someone to share the small details of life with, a partner to lean on, a hand to hold when nights felt too long. Ethan chewed thoughtfully, glancing up at her from time to time. Lavra could tell something was on his mind, but she chose not to press him. She had learned over the years that he spoke when he was ready. She only offered him presence, the quiet kind of love that waited without demand. But what she didn't realize was that Ethan had been watching her more closely than she. imagined. He had seen her sitting by the window alone, noticed the way her smile sometimes faded when she thought he wasn't looking. He had heard the sighs she let out late at night, the ones that sounded less like exhaustion and more like longing. And though he was still young, he understood enough to know that his mother deserved more than a life of half-finished conversations and quiet dinners. Thought she was protecting him by keeping her own emotions hidden. But Ethan saw through her. He had been waiting for the right moment to say something he knew would change, the way she looked at herself, and maybe the way she looked at the future. He didn't want to hurt her. In fact, his words came from love. But love sometimes has a way of opening wounds we think are healed. That evening, with the candle burning low, and the air outside growing colder, Lara had no idea that a single sentence from her son would pierce through the carefully built walls of her heart. She had no idea that dinner, so ordinary and simple, would become the moment she remembered for the rest of her life. And as she laughed softly at one of Ethan's jokes, reaching for her glass of water, she noticed the seriousness in his eyes. She didn't know it yet, but the next few seconds would change her more deeply than anything had in years. The words her son was about to speak would shatter the fragile balance of her world. The kitchen was warm with the smell of roasted chicken, but Laura barely noticed. She was watching her son across the table, seeing how much he had grown. His voice was deeper now, his shoulders broader, his smile the same as when he was a child. It amazed her how quickly time had passed. She remembered teaching him how to ride a bike, the first day of kindergarten, the way he used to run into her arms after school. Now he was 17, nearly an adult, and she wondered if she had prepared him enough for the world. They ate quietly for a moment. Ethan tapped his fork against his plate, his eyes thoughtful, like he was carrying something heavy inside. Lara noticed but didn't want to push him. She knew her son. He always spoke when the right moment came. Still, she sensed the weight in the air. It was the kind of silence that comes before something important. "Mum," Ethan finally said. His voice was soft, but it held a firmness that made Laura pause. She set her fork down, meeting his eyes. He didn't look like a boy in that moment. He looked older, wiser, and she felt a strange mix of pride and fear. "You work so hard," he continued. "You do everything for me. But—" He hesitated, biting his lip, searching for courage. "I just want you to be happy. You deserve to be loved again." The words struck her like a wave crashing against stone. For a second, she didn't understand what she had just heard. Loved again. Her heart stumbled and her breath caught. It was as though someone had reached inside her and uncovered a secret she had buried for years. She stared at him, her lips parted, but no sound came out. Her son's eyes softened, but he didn't look away. "I see you, Mom," he said gently. "I see how lonely you are sometimes. You smile for me, but when you think I'm not looking, I can tell. You've given everything to me, but you never give anything to yourself. I don't want you to live like that forever." Laura's chest tightened. She wanted to speak, to explain, but no words came. Her mind spun backward, to all the nights she had told herself she was fine, that she didn't need anyone. She had promised herself that being strong for Ethan was enough, but now her son was telling her that he saw through her strength, that he noticed the cracks she thought she had hidden. She blinked rapidly, trying to keep her emotions under control. "Ethan," she whispered, "you don't need to worry about me. I'm fine." But even as she said it, she heard how untrue it sounded. The word "fine" felt hollow in her mouth. Ethan shook his head. "No, Mom, you're not. You haven't been for a long time." The words pierced deeper than she expected. She felt her heart ache in a way she hadn't let herself feel in years. She wanted to argue, to tell him that she had chosen this life, that she had no regrets. But the truth was, hearing her son acknowledge what she kept hidden hurt more than she could bear. It wasn't judgment in his voice. It was love, a love so pure it broke her open. The candle flickered between them. Lavra looked at her son, seeing not just the boy she raised, but the young man he was becoming. His eyes carried both innocence and wisdom, and she realized how much he had grown not only in age, but in understanding. He wasn't speaking as a child. He was speaking as someone who wanted his mother to feel whole again. Her throat tightened. Memories rushed back her first date with David, the way he used to hold her hand, the laughter they once shared. Then the fights, the silence, the final goodbye. She had locked those memories away, convinced that keeping her heart closed was safer. But Ethan's words broke that lock wide open. "You deserve to be loved again." The sentence echoed in her head, louder each time. Lavra pushed her plate aside, unable to eat. She rested her hands in her lap, staring down, afraid to meet his eyes again. She didn't want him to see the tears gathering. "Ethan," she said quietly, "do you know what you're saying?" "Yes," he replied firmly. "I know. You always tell me I deserve happiness, that I should follow my heart. Why don't you believe the same for yourself?" His honesty left her breathless. She had never expected this conversation tonight, not at a simple dinner table, not from her own son. She had prepared herself for talks about college applications, friendships, maybe even relationships in his life, but not about her own. Not about her heart. Her mind raced. What would it even mean to love again? Could she? She had grown so used to her solitude that the idea of letting someone in again terrified her. She didn't know if she was ready to risk the pain, the disappointment, the vulnerability. But the way Ethan looked at her made her question everything. He wasn't asking out of pity. He wasn't pushing her. He was telling her the truth she needed to hear. Lavra swallowed hard, finally raising her eyes to him. "I don't know if I can," she admitted. Her voice was unsteady, the words small. "You can," Ethan said simply. "I believe you can." For a long moment, the room was silent except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. Lavra felt tears slip down her cheeks, and she quickly wiped them away, embarrassed. But Ethan only smiled gently, as if to say he understood. It was not the kind of shattering that destroyed. It was the kind that revealed. The kind that forced her to face what she had been running from. Her son's love, his clear and honest words, had cracked the shell she had built around herself. And though it hurt, deep inside she knew he was right. That night, Lavra lay awake long after Ethan had gone to his room. The candle had burned down, leaving only a faint scent of wax. She stared at the ceiling, Ethan's voice echoing in her mind. "You deserve to be loved again." She thought about the years that had passed, the chances she had turned away, the walls she had built higher and higher. She thought about what it meant to be seen not by a stranger, but by her own child. It humbled her. It frightened her. And yet, somewhere inside, it sparked something she thought was long gone, a quiet hope she hadn't dared to feel in years. As the night stretched on, she realized nothing would ever be the same. Her son's words had shattered the illusion of fine she had lived with for so long. Now she had to face the truth. Maybe her story wasn't finished after all. Night after Ethan's words, Lavra lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Sleep would not come. Her son's voice kept echoing in her mind, pulling her back to memories she had locked away. "You deserve to be loved again." The sentence was simple, but it cracked open doors she had kept shut for years. She thought of David, the man she once believed she would grow old with. Their love story had started like something out of a movie. College sweethearts, endless nights of laughter, dreams of a future they both believed in. Lara could still remember their first apartment, how tiny it was, and how they didn't care, because being together made everything feel enough. There had been love letters, whispered promises, and nights when he held her so close she thought she could never feel lonely again. But life had not followed the script she imagined. Over the years, stress, disappointments, and unspoken words built walls between them. What once felt effortless began to feel heavy. Arguments grew, silence followed, and eventually, the love they once held so tightly slipped away. Divorce papers ended the chapter, but the heartache lingered. Since then, Lara had told herself she was fine living without romance. She poured everything into Ethan, his school projects, his basketball games, his laughter. She convinced herself that her son's happiness was all the love she needed. And for a long time, it worked. But now, Ethan's words stirred a longing she thought she had buried too deep to find again. The next morning, she stood at the kitchen counter, pouring herself coffee, her hands trembling slightly. The world outside her window was the same: cars passing, neighbors jogging, but she felt different inside. She carried an ache that was both painful and alive. It was as though Ethan had reminded her that she wasn't finished, that her story was still unfolding. At work, she noticed things she hadn't before. Her colleague Mark, who often carried boxes for her, smiled at her a little longer than usual. She caught herself wondering if there was something in that smile. At the cafe, a man in line ahead of her held the door open and gave her a kind look. And for the first time in years, she felt a flutter of awareness. Even during her evening walks, she noticed couples walking hand in hand. And instead of brushing away the sight, she found herself pausing, wondering what it would feel like again to share such simple intimacy. The thought frightened her. She had spent so long convincing herself she didn't need love, that the idea of reaching for it now felt risky. What if she opened her heart again, only to be hurt? What if she disappointed herself, or worse, disappointed Ethan? But then she remembered the way Ethan had looked at her, with steady eyes and quiet love, telling her she deserved happiness. That memory gave her strength. One evening, Lara sat on the porch while Ethan did his homework inside. The sky was painted with streaks of purple and orange, and she held a cup of tea, trying to settle her thoughts. She realized that Ethan had not only spoken about her loneliness, he had given her permission to hope again. That was the part that truly changed her. She thought back to all the little moments she had ignored. Times when someone at work asked if she wanted to join a group dinner and she said no. Times when a neighbor offered casual conversation that could have been more. Times when she shut down her own heart before it had a chance to open. She had done all of this because she thought protecting Ethan meant closing off her own desires. But perhaps protecting him also meant showing him that love and joy were worth pursuing, no matter the risks. That night, she couldn't stop replaying memories of her younger self. The girl who once believed in romance, who once believed in new beginnings. She remembered the way her heart had raced the first time David kissed her, the way her cheeks hurt from laughing too much, the way she once dreamed of adventures with someone by her side. That girl still existed, buried beneath the years of quiet routines and loneliness. Lara began to notice how much she longed for connection. Not dramatic love stories or sweeping romances, but simple moments. A good conversation over coffee, someone to share dinner with, a hand to hold when the world felt heavy. Ethan's words had shown her that wanting these things did not make her weak. It made her human. As days passed, Lara found herself paying closer attention to the world around her. She was no longer invisible to her own heart. At the grocery store, she exchanged a few extra words with the cashier. At work, she let herself laugh a little more freely with her colleagues. And every night, when she sat by the window watching Ethan study, she thought about the life she had yet to live. But with every flicker of hope, fear followed. She still carried scars. She remembered the nights of arguments, the weight of disappointment, the silence after love fades. What if opening her heart meant repeating the same mistakes? What if hope only led to heartbreak again? Still, Ethan's words pushed her forward. You deserve to be loved again. He hadn't just noticed her loneliness. He believed she could find something better. That belief became her quiet strength. One Saturday morning, as she folded laundry, Laura realized how much had shifted inside her in just a few days. She caught herself humming softly, something she hadn't done in years. She realized she was looking at the future not with dread but with curiosity. What if something was waiting for her? What if she had the chance to feel alive again? Later that day, Ethan found her sitting by the window, her thoughts drifting. You okay, Mom? He asked. Laura smiled faintly, brushing her hair back. Yes, she said softly. I'm just thinking. Ethan gave her a knowing look, but he didn't push. He simply nodded, as though he already understood. And in that silence, Laura felt something inside her shift again, gratitude for her son, for his courage to speak what she had needed to hear, and for the fragile but growing hope blooming in her heart. As night fell, Laura lay in bed once more, but this time the silence didn't feel as heavy. Instead, it felt like a canvas, a blank space ready to be filled. She didn't know how or when, but she knew one thing for certain. The part of her she thought was gone, the part that longed, that hoped, that dreamed of love was alive again. And though she was afraid, she was ready to listen to it. The Saturday of Ethan's school charity event began like any other. Laura woke early, folded laundry, and prepared breakfast. She told herself it would be just another school program, the kind she had attended for years, speeches, performances, maybe a bake sale. But there was something in Ethan's voice when he asked her to come. He had been more insistent than usual, his smile almost secretive. She didn't think much of it at first, but a small spark of curiosity followed her as she dressed and got ready. The school gym was filled with chatter and music, students moving around tables decorated with posters and balloons. Laura held Ethan's jacket as he greeted his friends. She felt the warmth of being part of his world, proud of the boy she had raised. She was scanning the room, thinking about grabbing a cup of coffee, when Ethan appeared at her side again. His hand slipped into hers, unusual for him at this age, and his eyes carried a seriousness that immediately caught her attention. Come with me, Mum, he said. Laura followed without question. Ethan led her through the crowd to a corner near the stage, where a tall man stood talking to another parent. He had kind eyes, a steady presence, and when he turned to greet them, Laura felt her chest tighten unexpectedly. His smile was warm, genuine, the kind of smile that made her feel seen. Mum, Ethan said, his tone careful but full of quiet excitement. This is Daniel. He's my coach. Laura's heart skipped. She shook Daniel's hand, her words catching in her throat. She managed a polite hello, but inside, she was startled by the sudden rush of feelings she hadn't allowed herself to experience in years. Daniel's voice was calm, deep, and respectful. He asked about her day, about her thoughts on the event, making her feel comfortable almost instantly. As the three of them talked, Laura glanced at Ethan. She realized this meeting was no accident. Ethan had brought her here for a reason. He had seen her loneliness, had spoken the words that shattered her, and now he was giving her something she hadn't expected, a chance. Laura tried to steady her emotions, reminding herself it was just a simple introduction, nothing more. But the way Daniel looked at her, the sincerity in his eyes, stirred something long asleep in her heart. For years, she had avoided moments like this. She had turned away from possibilities, convinced she didn't need them. Now, standing beside her son and this kind man, she felt a door inside her trembling. Ready to open. Daniel spoke with an ease that made Lava feel safe. He didn't push, didn't overwhelm her, but his presence alone was comforting. She found herself laughing softly at his small jokes, surprised at how natural it felt. She realized how long it had been since she had shared that kind of moment with someone new. When the conversation ended and Daniel was called to help with the event, Lava stood still, her heart racing. Ethan tugged at her hand, looking up at her with a mischievous smile. "I thought you two might get along," he said simply. Laura's throat tightened, her eyes stinging with emotion. She wanted to scold him gently for meddling, but all she could do was smile. She realized he had been watching her carefully, not out of pity, but out of love. He wanted her to see that life didn't have to be as lonely as she had made it. On the drive home, the silence between them felt different. It wasn't heavy like before, it was alive with unspoken meaning. Lava glanced at Ethan, who sat relaxed in the passenger seat, and whispered, "You're too smart for your own good." He grinned, shrugging. "I just want you to be happy, Mom." Her eyes misted again, but this time the tears weren't from pain. They were from the fragile hope beginning to take root in her heart. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a different future, one where she wasn't alone. One where love might find her again in small, unexpected ways. That night, when the house was quiet, Lava stood by the window, looking at the stars. She thought about Daniel's kind smile, about the sound of his voice, about the gentle encouragement in her son's words. She realized that her world hadn't ended when Ethan spoke those painful truths at the dinner table. It had changed. His words had shattered her illusions, but in their place, he had given her something greater, the courage to hope again. Lava understood, now that shattering wasn't always destruction. Sometimes it was a beginning. Sometimes it was the only way to break free from walls too high, from fears too deep. She felt vulnerable, yes, but also alive. Her son had seen her heart more clearly than she had seen it herself. And in his quiet, determined way, he had guided her back toward a life she thought she no longer deserved. Lava pressed her hand against the glass, whispering to herself, "Maybe it's not too late." In that moment, she wasn't just a mother, or a woman defined by her past. She was someone standing on the edge of possibility, ready to step into the unknown. And though she didn't know where it would lead, she knew this. She was no longer afraid of the words that once shattered her, because those words had set her free.